I'm here with Grace Isford, partner at Lux Capital, avid marathon runner, and someone with an IQ 100 points higher than my own. Grace, really excited for you to be here today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for coming here to Lux NYC.
Absolutely, glad to be here. I'm reading this book right now called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, and it's about this boy who takes up long distance running to run away from his problems in life. And I'm curious, is there something, I don't think there's something you're running away from, but what's something you're running towards as a marathon runner?
Well, I'm actually running towards New York Tech Week and London Tech Week,
Okay.
so there's a lot of events going on both this week and next.
Yeah.
And also really excited about some of the stuff happening in AI right now.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of hype in the space, but we're really at the frontier of AI actually integrating with different industries outside of maybe your typical, coding or customer support, where we've seen a lot of penetration to date.
Grace, what value does New York Tech Week provide to venture capitalists like yourself? I feel like a lot of these events are just networking, getting drinks, or some sort of event to meet other founders. Is it really that valuable to VCs like yourself?
Well, New York Tech Week, for one, brings other folks like yourself into town, right?
True.
So there's a lot of folks passing through. It also is a great opportunity for folks to get to know other founders, for VCs to get to know folks, and to bring communities together. So I'm actually headed to a Hugging Face and Nomic Tech Week event tonight.
Oh, no way.
Which is like 350 developers here in New York. And so one thing I'm really excited about, which I'd be happy to chat about, is like the New York and AI scene today, because it's been growing exponentially. We're lucky to have partnered with the majority of our AI investments right here in New York, and really excited about the potential here. So in many ways, it's more of the same, but it's more of like the added emphasis on people coming, and then also the serendipity of running into people in these dense communities of AI or developers or whatever you're looking for.
Speaking of the New York tech ecosystem, do you think there's a world where New York surpasses Silicon Valley as being the tech hub for startups, or do you think that's always going to be Silicon Valley?
I think there's too much AI demand for any one city to keep up with it, and so I think SF will continue to be important, but New York is a very clear second, right? Of like 20% of AI funding is in New York right now, 40% in SF, that's number two, right? 1 in 7 folks are moving to New York in the tech scene. We're seeing a ton of movement here, combined with really, really great companies being built here. And so I think it's less about, it's SF versus New York, it's more about each major city is going to continue to be a hub. I think New York is really exciting. I think Paris is really exciting. I think Tokyo is really exciting with one of our investments called Sakana AI. And so we're really at the beginning of kind of this dense cities and folks bringing AI together based on kind of the populations there.
Definitely. And I feel like the biggest question marks around AI right now kind of revolve around regulation, safety, trust, accountability. In the next 5 years, do you think those will still be the number one question marks in AI, or do you think we'll have different issues and different question marks 5-10 years from now? If you can predict the future almost.
I'd like to be able to predict the future.
Sure.
I do think we're really early still in AI. I think a lot of enterprises are excited. It's in every Fortune 500 earnings report of how they're implementing AI. But on the ground, we're still really far away from in-depth LLMs in production at scale in enterprises. So I still think folks are overlooking the fact that we still need to actually get this technology in production. And then from that, other regulation and security and other things will follow. But the fundamental thing of actually just integrating the technology with your enterprise stack is I think where we're at for a majority of industries, particularly on the physical side, right? Manufacturing, robotics, space and defense, a lot of areas where Lux spends a lot of time.
Yeah, I kind of want you to go into that a little bit deeper. I feel like people who aren't in the tech and VC scene, they hear AI, they hear it being implemented, but they don't know what it actually looks like. So I want to read to you, y'all's websites, how you think about the next generation of startups. It says, we champion companies that work at the intersection of the new and the not yet imagined, looking decades into the future to create a world most of us can barely imagine. Does that mean like flying cars, or is it more practical in some sense? Could you give us a hint of what that might look like?
Well, a great example is one of our company called Osmo. Osmo is an ML company. They're creating a machine learning platform to recreate olfaction. That's the sense of smell.
Oh, wow.
Sounds crazy, right? I don't think you've probably ever heard of a company recreating the sense of smell before.
And people?
It's a machine, so they can detect the molecules in a scent and then be able to recreate that. So your grandma's chocolate chip cookies, for example, or the smell of fresh snow or rain, or take your pick. There's also some really cool healthcare use cases for that. So take malaria has a scent, COVID has a scent. That's a really good example of what we're looking for. So an idea that may seem crazy or be on the frontier, kind of as you mentioned. And we want everyone to agree with us, but usually this technology could still be in a research stage or could be really early in the commercialization phase. So you don't see, Osmo and market yet today. I expect you will see them in the future, but it's a really good example of things we look for is where they're taking a technical insight or technical advantage or moat and turning that into a product.
Got it. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, like the whole New York, San Francisco debate. I feel like VCs have this conversation all the time, and it's been going around for years. But what role does New York play in the global tech ecosystem? Like New York specifically, this is what New York does.
Well, the talent in New York, the talent is here and the demand is here, right? 4 to 500s. There's 44 of the Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here. Major industries like financial services and media. No matter where your company is based, you are coming to New York to talk to those customers. I think people often overlook also the talent here. So take, the NYU Silver Lab. That's spearheaded by Jan LeCun, the chief scientist of Meta. He's based here.
Wow.
Cornell Tech, Columbia, Princeton. So just the pure research firepower is based right here in New York, where people want to live. Cornell Tech also has Sasha Resch, who's a lead researcher at Hugging Face. In Lux's own portfolio, we've seen AI benefit in New York firsthand. So, Hugging Face, where we led the Series A, is based here. Runway, where we led the seed in the generative AI for video space, is based here. Mosaic ML, their research team, that's acquired by Databricks, is based here. So we've seen not only the demand, but the talent beds and their growth firsthand.
You're name dropping a lot of companies right now, and I imagine you get in front of a lot of these startups every single day. When you meet with a founder, what's a cliche that you hear in a pitch that's kind of cringy to you?
I was thinking about this earlier. I generally am afraid in this environment when someone tells me, I'm the best at this, or kind of avoiding anything about the competitive landscape. So if a company says, we are the best in this space, and then they are blatantly ignoring the 10 other companies that are doing the same thing, it's very unusual today to be the only AI application company, for example, doing customer support or doing coding. And so if I see a company saying, we're really unique or different, they may be different, but they need to also be able to acknowledge and say, this is how we are similar or different than the alternative. So I really look for that, is that kind of like intellectual honesty.
Yeah, like humility about yourself.
And humility, and also having a thoughtful response. What would really wow me is, hey, I am in a crowded AI coding space, but I'm taking a different or nuanced approach, or a different technical approach to this space, whether that's in customer support or audio or a totally different enterprise application.
Regulation often slows innovation. And you're investing in spaces that are, we're still in the forefront of what's going to happen with AI. How do you feel as an investor if there's regulation, deep regulation into areas like AI? Does that kind of upset you? How do you feel about the next generation of how these industries and technologies will be regulated?
So I think it's very early to know. And I think we are going to continue to see increased probably levels of transparency and security across the sector more broadly. I always look to a great example in our portfolio company called Hugging Face. Again, they're like GitHub for machine learning, big presence here in New York, and they've taken a very open source approach to the space of working with regulators. And Clem himself actually testified, at Congress about the value of open source technology, and are actually being really transparent on how they're training models, how they're working with different players, as is kind of like GitHub for machine learning. So I look for that kind of as the next step, knowing that we're still very early from the technology productizing and also from regulation actually even going into place.
Before we started rolling, we were talking about what we had for breakfast this morning.
Yes.
What's your morning routine, Grace?
Morning routine, I usually get up anytime between 6:30 and 7. Go for a run, first thing usually.
That's right.
I'm a big runner, as we talked about at the beginning.
Earlier,
Pilates is my new thing, so I've been doing that. But I'm an early morning workout, very important to me. Then
rather than post-workout.
Totally. Then gotta have my iced Americano and enjoy a little bit of the news
Where do you
before I get into
Where do you go
the
to
email.
get your Americano?
I usually make it at home. But I do have a Merriweather coffee shop in the West Village is my go-to on the walk to work if I don't have time to make one.
Dang, that's a nice place to go. I've actually never been there, but I've heard it's
gotta go. It's a good one.
Really, really good. I was asking this question to a couple of the VCs recently about your VCs can be VC famous, and that's kind of the only famous that they can be. Why aren't venture capitalists more famous in the media?
Oh, interesting. I think some are, right? I mean, I even think like Josh on our team is a great example of that, where a lot of people know of him or know of his Twitter, and I also think he's a fantastic venture capitalist.
Do you think Twitter's a good tool for to get more famous?
I think it could be, right? And I've even found in-source companies or met really cool experts or leaders in research on Twitter themselves, seeing their paper and then DMing them. I think there are many different ways to do venture well, right? And so some are extroverts and really media-centric and want to share and show from the rooftops. Others are very research-oriented and would prefer to be reading research papers all day and just being a bit more introverted in their approach. And so there's such a wide spectrum of how to be a good venture investor. I think it's what's authentically natural to you is kind of the most important balance to strike. But it is a great way of getting your name out there and helping folks know that you exist and that you are an investor out on the market. And so it can be a very powerful tool to reach more people.
Grace, last question. Over the next 20 years, which of these 3 companies do you think will have the most impact on the tech scene? OpenAI, SpaceX, or Meta?
Meta.
Why Meta?
I think all 3 will, for what it's worth. And those are all good options. I think what Meta's been doing with Llama 3 and Llama 400B, and assuming Llama 400B does get published, really, really exciting and important for the ecosystem. It's a natural equalizer in many ways for allowing more and more folks to access open source large language models, but also we'll have interesting dynamics for the ecosystem at large, where we'll probably cut into the margin of a lot of other players. I think there's a lot of big questions in terms of, again, will Llama 400B be launched? Sure. How will they actually monetize it over time? And what is, Meta and Zuck's long-term strategy? But I would be long Meta right now.
Awesome. Grace, we really appreciate your time.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
Absolutely.